This is a podcast on the Globe Theatre essay. Now, the exam board never tell me exactly what it's going to be. Nobody knows the exact question, but it'll be something like, in terms of theatres, something about entertainment or culture in Elizabethan times, or it could be something about, the hierarchy of society. So the one that I gave you to do over the holidays. So it could be something about, how it reflects the structure of Elizabethan society. So you need to remember that you need an introduction, then you need a paragraph about location, then you need one about function and design, then you need one about structure, and then you need one about people connected with it. And then your conclusion, you need to go back to the question and agree, okay? And you can also think of any other factors that you think, played a role in terms of Elizabethan theatre. But the chosen site is the Globe, so you need to be talking about the Globe and everything that you saw there. Okay, so here goes. Most of Elizabeth's plays were performed in the yards of really inns or in town halls or, taverns. And really what the whole point of it was to try and get people entertained, but the people who did the entertainment, they had to pay money to the inns and things to use their yards to show the plays. They had to do this because at the beginning of Elizabeth's reign, there wasn't one purpose-built theatre. There was none at all. Troupes of players, that used to be, a group of 4 or 5 actors, toured around the country, and they performed these plays, and they used to look for a noble patron. So somebody who would have money, help to sponsor them, if you like. And if they got a noble patron, then they were seen as, serious actors. If they didn't have, then they were just seen as vagabonds, that they were just people who were homeless and just moved from place to place. However, the Mayor and the Council of London weren't happy with these plays at all, as they thought they were irreligious, so they thought they were actually against religion, they were really concerned about them. And others believed that it distracted people from the work, and they weren't very happy when there was large crowds. They worried what would happen in these big crowds, there would be a lot of crime and things. So one of the first purpose-built theatres was the Globe, and it was a clear reflection of the hierarchy of Elizabethan society, okay? Because it had a 3-tiered structure design, and this was a representation of the society that they lived in. So they'd have the peasants in the pit, which would be at the bottom, and they would be standing room only, and they could just pay a penny to go there. And then, as it went up, it would go to gentry, and then it would move up to the nobility. Despite the segregation, there were always people from every part of society attending the plays, which were starting to increase in popularity. So that's really important. So in terms of it, although they were all obviously segregated into the different structured areas, they could actually all watch the same play at the same time. And that was very unusual for poor and rich to be able to mix like that. Now, in terms of location, the Globe needed to be built on the south bank of the River Thames and outside the city walls, because the theatre was still frowned upon as a source of entertainment. Therefore, in 1599, it was erected at Bankside in Southwark, on the south bank of the Thames. And most Puritans believed the theatre was a sin, and that people would be committing crimes and drinking, creating an unstable society. This was partly due to the location of the theatre being situated near the bear baiting and dog fighting, arenas. And the Red Lion, another theatre, was built in Whitechapel, and this is one of the toughest areas of London. And this was the first theatre to be built. Now, the fact that they were built in tougher areas or on the other side of the river shows how worried they were about, crime and the influence that, the theatre might have. Before the English Reformation, the church owned much of the land immediately outside the city and inside. And many parts of this ex-church land was called liberties. And they used to be outside the control of the city government. Now, the Globe's location also demonstrates the attitudes towards theatres at the time, because in the latter part of Elizabeth's reign, attitudes did start to improve as noble patrons became a lot more involved in the theatres. And the Queen obviously liked the theatre and things herself and the plays, so that obviously helped. This was also a clear demonstration of the change in entertainment in Elizabethan times due to the Globe. Another reason for the specific location was the risk factor of diseases. For example, when the plague was around in 1593 and 1603, the theatres were closed for a while for protection because they worried that the disease would spread very quickly in those sorts of crowded areas. Now, the next part you need to think about is function. So with the function, previously theatres were viewed as something for ordinary people, usually performed in the back of, a backyard of an inn, as we said. However, as the Elizabethan period saw a major change in how the theatre worked, with the building of the first permanent theatres, both rich and poor now attended the performances. So this was the main function of it, for both of those groups to be able to go. With a three-tiered design resembling the structure of Elizabethan society, it meant ordinary people were in the pit to stand and watch, and it was completely open to the weather. And they often heckled the actors, so the behaviour wasn't particularly good from the peasants. It cost 1p for a ticket in this area, and with the degrading, name of the pit, you already knew, where they were in society, the peasants there in the pit. The Elizabethan society also gave them the name of groundlings, so you could call them either in the pit, or they could call the people groundlings instead of, the peasantry, but that's where the peasants were stood. The next level up were the galleries, which were where the gentry were seated. And in terms of this, it was obviously more expensive to sit here because it actually had some cover over it. There were also balconies on either side called the gentlemen's rooms, and those seats were around 4p. The most expensive seats you could get were at the top to resemble the hierarchy. These were the lords' rooms, and these were sometimes used by actors and musicians. As a way of being noticed, the nobility would sometimes arrive late to these seats, and the idea was that they'd wear the best clothes and the hats and things like that, and they were making a statement because actually they wanted to sit there behind the stage and at the sides and things so people could see them, and it was all about showing the wealth really. Right, the next part is about structure. So, the great chain of being in the Elizabethan society was represented through the three-tiered structure in the Globe Theatre. The Globe Theatre held round about 3,000 spectators, and it helped keep the social hierarchy or social structure in place in Elizabethan England. So even when they were being entertained, they were reminded who was above them or who was below them. In 1576, a theatre called The Theatre, yes I know, not very original, was built by an actor called Burbage, on land owned by a Puritan called Giles Allen. And he didn't renew the lease in the clause. So what happened was, the clause allowed the site to belong to him, but anything on the site belonged to Burbage. So Burbage and his actors, along with labourers, dismantled the theatre on a snowy December night when Allen was away, and they then labelled, with the help of a carpenter, they labelled all the different parts of the theatre that they'd taken down, so they'd be able to reassemble it somewhere else. So what happened was, they reassembled the Globe Theatre in Southwark, which is obviously, on the other side of the River Thames. And Dr. John Dee helped design it and was an expert in ancient Greek and Roman architecture, so Renaissance architecture, which was very fashionable at the time. Entertainment was one of the key functions of this theatre, and the roof over the stage was often called the heavens, and the trapdoor in the floor went to hell. The tiring room was where the actors put on the costumes and they could get changed. And the front scenae, which was the scenery part that's on the back, so if you went on the trip you remember, on the back wall there was things drawn on, and that was like the scenery that was constantly there. And that had a door for entrances and exits coming off it as well. So who was connected with the Globe Theatre then? Well, the people connected with it, there were 4 key actors really that shared the Globe. Augustine Phillips, Thomas Pope, John Hemmings and William Shakespeare. Obviously Shakespeare is very, very famous, so I'm sure you remember to write about him. Playwrights like Shakespeare produced new works every year, including comedies, histories and tragedies. The acting profession was led entirely by males. There was no female actors, and the female roles were often played by young boys. They wanted that, before the voices had broken and things like that. There were some popular actors like Richard Burbage, who was the one who started off that theatre called The Theatre, and he became very famous and would often have parts written specifically for him because people liked to go and see him, act. Performances would usually begin about 3 o'clock and they continued early into the evening. And due to the light that they needed for the place to be visible, they thought if they started them at 3, they'd be able to get them done before they then needed any artificial lighting. because this was obviously difficult because they rely on candles, and that in itself would be very expensive and detract from the profits that they could make from showing the play. So the theatre troupes would regularly perform in the plays, like the Lord Chamberlain's Men. Both Burbage and Shakespeare were members of this, and the people who provided their funding, the patron, would usually be the name of the companies, and being a good way of, like, you know, sort of publicising the patron. So what we're saying in terms of that, they got called the Lord Chamberlain's Men because that someone called Lord Chamberlain would help, you know, to sponsor them. So it was all about finding a patron, and if they got a patron, you know, a patron to help put money into it, they wanted to do that because they wanted to impress the Queen, because she was interested in the theatres, so they thought they would do that. So to signal a performance was going to come on, there would be a flag erected so people knew that there was going to be a performance that day. It would be white for a comedy or black for a tragedy, okay? So there was different colours depending on what type of play you wanted to go and see. And it was really common for the audience members to push and shove to ensure they had the best view possible of the play. And the atmosphere would be boisterous, it really would. People didn't just sit in silence or stand in silence. All types of classes, though, enjoyed it, and this is the really important thing about this. They could go there for a cheap afternoon for the poor and enjoy a play, and the rich could go there to show the wealth and how well they were doing, how cultured they were. So although they occupied different parts of the theatre, the rich and poor would watch exactly the same play. So how would you conclude this essay? Well, depending on what the question asks, obviously you'd have to go back and look at the question. Is it entertainment? Is it not about entertainment? Is it about, you know, new fashions or culture? Or is it about, you know, the social structure in Elizabethan society? So this would cover these things. The design of the Globe Theatre does reflect the structure of Elizabethan society, as the great chain of being is evident, with the peasants in the pit at the bottom and the nobility in the lords' rooms at the top. And most certainly the designs of Elizabethan theatres symbolise the social structure. There's absolutely no doubt that that is shown in the Globe Theatre, just like it was in the manor houses like Hardwick Hall. The new purpose-built theatres were exciting and brought people from around the country, as it was seen as a major social event. And also, the good thing about it was affordable for all classes. It was for entertainment for all, really. There are a range of ticket prices depending on whether you were going to actually stand or sit, or whether you were going to be open to the elements with the open roof, or you were going to be under the sheltered part. It was primarily, though, for entertainment, and it was relevant and contemporary to the time, the plays that were shown. The plays would differentiate from being humorous to historical to tragic. However, many of the plays, and this is important, carry political messages and could be used as propaganda. So if Elizabeth wanted something to be put out there as a message, then the playwrights would make sure it was in there. And if she wasn't happy with something, then they wouldn't obviously show it. Towards the end of Elizabeth's reign, the negative attitudes towards the theatre were beginning to change, and this was partly because Elizabeth I enjoyed and attended them herself, causing it to be more fashionable amongst the nobility, and obviously then people started to support it as powerful patrons. She loved Shakespeare's plays. She really, really did think they were brilliant, and the troops of actors obviously then started to become richer because there was more demand for people to go to the theatres, and there was somewhere for them to actually do the acting. Therefore, the design and structure of the Globe does support the statement about it being showing the structure of Elizabethan society, absolutely, definitely. And it has also highlighted the change of attitudes towards theatres over Elizabeth's reign. Remember, at the start of the reign, there wasn't a purpose-built theatre in sight. By the end of the reign, obviously there was the Globe, but there was other ones as well, like the Red Lion, and obviously when she died, more and more and more just started to be built. And what is important is the change in attitudes were mainly due to Elizabeth's reign and, you know, what she thought of the theatre, and it created a popular pastime for the rich and poor, being both the peasants and the nobility. So in this podcast I've covered the key things about the chosen historical site, about the Globe Theatre, but what you must remember, and I will keep considering this and telling you this in class, you must make sure you read the question. Remember, last year it was about Hardwick Hall, and that was about new fashions, the things that it showed about that. But they still wrote exactly the same things as they would be writing if it was about showing the wealth or prosperity of their owners. Okay, so the material in it is the same, you just need to make sure that you use the facts to direct it towards the actual title that's been set. Okay, good luck, and we'll go over this plenty of times.